All right. Welcome, everybody, to another Our Revolution Washington endorsement interview. Today, we are joined with um, Courtney Love, our vice chair, Amber King, our secretary, and we are interviewing Mary Ellen Biggerstaff. She is running for state rep in Washington State in Legislative District 22. Welcome, Mary Ellen. Thank you so much for taking your time out today to meet with us.
Thank you very much. It's nice to be here.
Beautiful day out today. What a great scenery you have. I would like you to just start off, introduce yourself, but really, I like to kind of get in the nitty gritty on what made you actually step up and run for this position. Talk about that and go ahead.
Yeah, my name is Marianne Biggerstaff. I am a first time candidate for elected office. I am a nurse practitioner. I have a doctorate in nursing and a master's degree in public health. I've been a nurse for 15 years, but 11 of those years I have spent working in a rural healthcare community, working with what we call an underserved population, so primarily Medicare and Medicaid. And I think I grew up a Democrat. I still identify as a Democrat and have kind of been that way. Been somewhat involved my whole life, or just interested in politics. But I think, like a lot of people, kind of what happened in 2016 changed me a little bit. Kind of radicalizing of what was going on with that election, and then what happened afterwards. So post 2016, a couple things were going on. I became more and more aware of how little what I could do as a nurse practitioner in the clinic for people when they were very poor, and when you had working class people that couldn't access healthcare, couldn't afford their medications, didn't have housing, didn't really have a lot of options for any kind of safety net. Um, and just seeing the limits of what I could do and how much I could help people. And that combined with Medicare for all, and Bernie Sanders coming out and really fighting for that. And I like to use the term moral courage, because I think if you had asked me 10 years ago, I would have been like, of course we should have universal health care, but that's never going to happen. I'm crazy. Like that's just, why nobody's ever going to get that. So why even talk about it? And watching, Bernie Sanders and both the DSA and National Nurses United really fight for that, and watch that transformation of that becoming a more and more popular idea, and realizing like it is not crazy to demand basic human rights in the United States. That, in the combination of watching the 2016 election and realizing things are not just gently, nicely headed in that direction on their own. We need to be really actively involved, and we need to be radical, and we need to demand what we know is right, and what is ethical and moral and best for the country, and for the working class. So that kind of after 2016, I joined up with the Olympia DSA and became really involved in the Medicare for All canvassing and political work. That was also kind of an interesting wake up call, because our congressman at the time was Denny Heck, and I really have nothing generally bad to say about him as a human being, but I thought, oh yeah, he's working for us. That's great. And he was really very, very firmly opposed to Medicare for all. Like and no amount of canvassing we were going to do was going to change his mind. So I think that was somewhat of a political wake up call for myself of being a little alarmed by that. Yeah, and so as you kind of see that and you learn more, I enrolled in a master's in public health. I wanted to learn more about health policy and how I could affect it, and what was really possible at the state. And I had thought a little bit about running. I had talked to different people kind of that I knew in the area, about potentially running for an office. And I live actually outside of, this is nitty gritty, but I live outside of the city limits. And so I couldn't run for city council. I kind of had some limited options. And when it was announced that Petulia was not going to be running for this seat, she was going to be running for Congress, and that there was going to be an open seat, I just decided that that was a really great time, that I should run, and I should go for it, and just do the absolute best I could. And I really wanted to talk about the social determinants of health, which is that idea of all those things that go into making a person healthy and well, that have nothing to do with like their medical care. It's housing and healthcare and their education and economic opportunities, their employment. And that makes up 70% of what makes a person healthy or not. Like 30% is the healthcare that they can get, and that's super, super important too. But just talking about that picture and getting people to understand that idea was really important to me. So I just kind of jumped at the chance, and I've got a huge political education in the last 6 months. And doing it through a pandemic is a little interesting, to say the least. But yeah, I have been really fortunate. I'm running very closely with a great group of volunteers from the Olympia DSA, and that's been amazing. I actually did just get the national DSA endorsement, which was a lot of work, and it was really a huge achievement and really encouraging to get that. So yeah.
Beautiful. Congratulations on that. Courtney, did you have your little piece that you wanted to do before I go forward?
Oh, I just wanted to know a little bit about your district. Like, where is it overlay?
Yeah, so my district is in Thurston County. So it is actually a pretty, compared to the other legislative districts in the state, it's pretty compact. It's Olympia, Lacey, and some of Tumwater. Yeah, and there is about 105,000 registered voters in that district. It also, I would add, is one of the most progressive districts in the state. So I think it's pretty exciting to be running in this district because you can be really, really openly progressive and not apologetic because you're not in a swing district. And you can say, I think we should have higher taxes and universal health care coverage. And that's okay. You can kind of get away with it, which I know in some swing districts, people have to be very, very careful about what they openly support.
Yes, they do. And we do like those that are more openly.
I'd say that there are plenty of people in safely Democratic districts who are not bold.
Yes, I agree. So one of the big things that we're about is anti-corruption and election reform and getting big money out of politics. So there's a couple questions in this realm for you. First off, can you talk about your fundraising, how you are fundraising, and if you do take any PAC money, what they tend to be, and what do you feel about like super PAC money? Do you plan on being open to taking any of those?
Yeah, so I am, it's absolutely completely essential for me that I will not take any corporate PAC money. I don't take any corporate donations at all. I'm completely funded by small donors at this point. I did take a donation of Vote Builder through the House Democratic Caucus. I was eligible for campaign services, and I think that that technically counts as a PAC. But I was comfortable with, you know, with using that donation. But yeah, and I think it's very interesting to me because I actually had pretty modest fundraising goals, and I've met those. I have an all volunteer campaign. And so I must say I'm actually a little bit mystified by why the insistence on certain fundraising dollars of, oh, you know, you have a goal of $50,000 to run for the state legislature, because I didn't really feel like that's even necessary to run a really good campaign. That I think that you can, especially if you're focused heavily on volunteers, running a good campaign for like $15,000 to $20,000. I don't see why the emphasis on more and more money, that we should just fundraise and that's got to be the most important thing that you do. Yeah, so I've been able to make the targets that I wanted to do. I've been able to afford all the things that I wanted to, and my campaign is completely volunteer run, which helps. But yeah,
Beautiful.
and I really think it should be the standard, no matter whether you're a Bernie Krat or a DSA member or whoever you are, that no Democrat should be taking corporate money and funding it all for their campaigns. I don't think there's really any great reason for it.
Beautiful. Thank you for that. So another thing that tends to stifle like third party candidates or more marginalized communities is our top two system. We have a jungle primary, kind of the top two get to go forward into the general, and that's usually the established candidates on either side of the parties. Have you heard about, and if you have, what do you think about ranked choice voting or a star voting system?
Yes, and I'm trying to, I think the ranked choice voting is a great idea. I have mostly heard about it from a podcast that I listened to last year, where they kind of broke it down and talked about what a great idea it was and how it would improve democracy. I am trying to think of the name of the organization because I was named a ranked choice voter champion.
Fair Vote
Thank
Washington.
you. Yes, Fair Vote. I wasn't
Yep.
looking at my, yeah. Yeah, and I must say I don't know exactly what the best level of government that being implemented at. Would it be best at the state level? Would it be best if it came through the federal level? You know, how it would be implemented. But I think it's a great idea, and I absolutely think that we need to be improving our democracy and our democratic structures in Washington. So
Excellent. Thank you. The other thing we talk about, Washington's been pretty good at state level. It's starting to vote in democracy laws, but there's still a few out there. And going on ranked choice voting, have you heard about like a proportional representation coming out of that? So getting like districts together and doing a ranked choice and then the top get to kind of fill in that district versus each individual office running. Have you heard much about that?
No, I haven't. No, that's an interesting idea. So no.
Okay, that's part of what Fair Vote's going to be kind of going for. So I just want to put that in your head because that's something I think we're going to be pushing for the future. So open your mind to that a little bit. There was something else, but I can't think of it. But I'm going to go ahead and let Amber or Courtney. Who wants to go next? Courtney. No, was that pointed to Amber?
All right. Hi, Mary Ellen. Thanks for joining us today. So I had a question for you. I was looking through your questionnaire and saw that you were looking for more state solutions on whistleblower programs. We had a question specifically in regards to Edward Snowden, Chelsea Manning, John Curacao, et cetera. And knowing the level of, I would say, surveillance and surveillance technology in Washington state, have you any policy positions that you think at a state level would improve transparency and the ability for whistleblowers in Washington state?
And like I said, that was actually something that I would like to know more a little bit about, because I didn't feel like I had a really deep expertise, and I try to not spout off opinions unless I really understand, what I'm saying. I think that it does in a lot of ways tie into criminal justice reform as well. So one idea that might be potentially related is I actually am really in favor of having a civilian law enforcement oversight agency at the state level that would oversee across the board. And I think that, especially if that was just for the whole entire criminal justice system, or that was the option, I think that would be great. And one example is actually similar, is as a nurse, as a licensed nurse, anybody in the state could file a complaint against me. That doesn't mean I'm going to be punished or it's even going to be fully investigated. But I think that idea of like, that's a really good safety system to have in. Anybody has that power to be like, hey, and I'm going to tell this to somebody that's totally divorced from that process, divorced from that agency. They're going to look at this with fair procedures, and they're going to take a look at this and investigate if needed. So I don't think that completely answers the question about what we might need, but I think that just having more democratic oversight and civilian oversight of how those processes work and make it very open and transparent to the public is really important.
Yeah, I recently saw that there's actually a larger amount of private security in Washington state than actual police force, which is pretty surprising to me. So
yeah, I didn't realize that.
There's also been reports of DNA, like fluorescent tagging, where they're spraying protesters and then going to arrest them at their house because they have DNA location, abilities to be able to track people. So it's quickly, I would say, an evolving topic. I believe right now our state only is able to whistleblow on state levels, but not, say as I work for such and such company and they're doing nefarious things, so it's I guess to that purview. But yeah, thank you for your answer. I appreciate it. Oh, you're muted.
Okay.
Oh.
I kept trying to touch it to unmute myself. So I was looking through your questionnaire, and I see under gun control that you talk about limiting the type of guns that are available, requiring safety training and licensure and insurance for firearms. Do you have any concern or ideas to resolve this, like public funding for those things, but pricing people out of gun ownership?
Oh yeah. One really good. And sorry, were you going to say something else? Did I cut you off or no? Okay.
No, that was basically it.
Yeah. So and again, I would very much like to know more from the legal standpoint, but kind of one public health solution that I have heard that I think, and most of my viewpoints kind of come from more of a public health outlook, that's kind of how I see the world, is to require insurances for private gun ownership, the same way that we require car insurance. So if you are going to purchase you want to purchase a firearm, you can, but you also have to carry liability insurance on that. And potentially that could be something that would cause people to not necessarily be able to afford a weapon. I don't know, because it hasn't been implemented in the US, but I know it's used elsewhere, and I think it is one potentially good idea.
This group does need we need to have a meeting about our thoughts and what we would like to see for gun control. So it's not like we have ourselves defined ourselves in this space, but we do know that we have someone at the periphery of our group that has convinced someone who is closer to the core against insurance for guns. So when we figure that out and can pass that on to you, we will. But and then, are you with limiting the types of guns that are available, are you comfortable also then limiting the types of guns that are used to police us?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And, and I think it is a good question, that I do think that pretty much any law or regulation or policy we would implement should be equitable. And I mean, maybe it sounds a little bit silly to say that that should be for gun control, but I don't think we want a scenario where it's like those same guns are available, but it's only limited to people that make $100,000 a year. It would be good to make sure that it was equitable, that people couldn't access those weapons across the board. So, shoot, and what was the second part of that question?
Just the limiting of the weapons that were policed by. I think it was
yes,
a one part.
The demilitarization of police, and yes, I think that is really important. From what I understand, that's not readily controlled at the state level. That is more local and county level. But absolutely, I'm very much for making sure that we don't have military grade weapons in police and law enforcement in Washington.
Because while we don't have our official stance on it, I think most of us agree that the government shouldn't have a monopoly on violence, and that an armed populace protects against tyranny. We're that far left in this group, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. So going from that and things that happen from gunshots, so let's talk about healthcare. Healthcare next. So in Washington State, so I know you're for Medicare for All idea. Washington State, we have an organization called Whole Washington who's been working on initiatives, but we have a bill needing to be sponsored in the House. It's Whole Washington Trust is what it's called, and it's 5222 right now, just sitting there. There is a sponsor in the Senate. Have you heard about Whole Washington? And if so, what's your thoughts about a state single-payer healthcare plan?
Yes, I'm very familiar with Whole Washington, and I signed on very early on to be a supporter. That if I was elected, I would absolutely be introducing that to the legislature. I know Mark Elias was the senator that introduced it to the Senate. And yes, and I've actually been attending the town halls and forums that they have had with the work group that is looking at what is possible. I do like to. I think the one clarification is some people.
Hold on one quick. Your
audio went a little.
Your audio went down just a little bit. Try it again.
Okay.
Yep, I can hear you.
Yes,
Yep.
okay, good. And one thing that I do think is important is kind of differentiating for people what the difference is between what is Whole Washington and what is Medicare for All, and that there are differences there. But I think that Whole Washington is such a great grassroots organization and is at least pushing the limit on what can we do at the state level if we aren't able to get federal Medicare for All passed. So I think that, and the collaboration potentially with Oregon and California for single-payer universal health care are excellent options that we need to keep a close eye on.
Beautiful. Thank you for that. Amber?
I have a follow-up question to that.
And I was going to say Colorado wants in on that too.
Yes, we'll adopt them. I also work in healthcare and I've worked in public health. And I think one of the more frustrating situations we have here in Washington state is the number of state level representatives that are pro-medical, pro-health doctors who do not support whole Washington and take large sums of corporate money to keep things like whole Washington out of passing through the healthcare committee. I'm wondering what specific actions you might be able to do or coalitions you would want to bring to change that paradigm for us.
Well, I do think that, and not just, I think that health insurance companies and also in our district, real estate developers and real estate, kind of that lobby, are two of the more influential donors, like corporate donors that you have. I do not know off the top of my head of no specific policy solutions to address health insurance companies having an influence. But I think as we build a momentum of who gets elected and why, I think, slowly but surely just demanding that the bare minimum is that any Democrat or even frankly any Republican, but that any elected official is not going to take that corporate money. I actually think that social pressure and electoral pressure is probably a better way to address that problem than passing policy, and passing legislation. But I'm very open to hearing any solutions that people have come up with, or if any states have really taken care of that problem, because it's really insidious, and it's pretty awful how much influence and how much good legislation gets backed because it doesn't benefit the private insurance companies.
Thank you.
Courtney?
So Washington has a large, I think, the most recognized tribes in the state, and some multiple within your district, if I'm not mistaken. And so like all people of color, the indigenous and the rest of our people, neighbors of color, are continue to face prejudice and systemic racism. While local police departments are not within the purview of the state house, your feelings on the defunding of police and taking the reallocation of those funds towards services that will help, and some of those services could come from state, that would help reduce crime, reduce recidivism, reduce desperation, and reduce therefore the need for police. And then just the bigger picture of systemic racism, but also, even though it's not in your purview, the local police stuff. I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so there's so I'm going to guess I speak a little bit more broadly about just systematic racism and what can we do about that as legislators. And I think the defund the police movement is one, incredible how fast that has been adopted and kind of come to the forefront. I guess maybe it's not incredible to people that have been working on it for 10 years, but how quickly I think that has become something that people understand as a concept, which even if they disagree with it, at least identifying it and talking about it is and really much broader support than I think there was 5 years ago. But no, and I think, you rather than even identifying, okay, which group at any point is being harmed by that, I think anything that is disproportionate, and particularly our criminal justice system in Washington state, is disproportionately harmful to African Americans and Native Americans. If you're just looking at who's incarcerated and the rates of incarceration, those are the two groups that are way more disproportionately incarcerated than any other ethnic groups. So yeah, I think that defunding the police is going to be something that's going to be done really at a city level, but at the same time, enacting a criminal justice law enforcement, a law enforcement agency, civilian law enforcement agency that oversees all law enforcement in Washington, so that it is not dependent upon having more of a liberal city council that's going to implement something like that, that's going to be implemented across the board and is really accountable to communities of color so that they have an involvement in that and that they can gain trust back in law enforcement as well. But I also think it's incredibly important that we look at our education systems, our housing systems, our healthcare systems. Systematic racism is absolutely embedded into all of those. And, I think it's such an enormous task, especially as a white person, being like, okay, where do I start? What is my role in that? What can I do? And I think starting the conversation with just being very aware of, who do you talk to when you need to understand a bill better? How do you look at it through an anti-racist lens? So yeah, I would also really be very strongly in favor of working to decriminalize drug use and substance abuse. A lot of the work that I have done has been with opiate addiction and Suboxone therapy in the last several years. And I must say in Elma, I work with primarily a population of white. It's a heavily white area in Grays Harbor County. But it's still like the harm that comes to people with substance abuse being involved in the criminal justice system and the waste of money is just really ridiculous. So I think looking to further decriminalize substance abuse, allow for anybody that needs it or wants it to be able to get the best treatment available is incredibly important, as well as people to get mental health treatment if they need it. It's not anywhere close to available right now like it needs to be, especially for people that are from lower income or have difficulties accessing that care.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, in addition to that, how do you feel about safe consumption sites?
I am in favor of safe consumption sites. So my whole training has really been focused here at the Matt Clinic in Olympia on harm reduction. And so I've really gotten to know and see firsthand what an amazing tool that is. I know that is a very hard sell for people that see that as a bad thing and you should never ever encourage it, and have a really hard time understanding why the best thing you can do is, if somebody has a substance use disorder and is addicted to opiates, is just make sure that they don't die and that they don't have a lot of harmful consequences, and that offer treatment if they would like to stop using, that's available for them. So I'm totally in favor of harm reduction, including safe injection sites.
Okay, so following that, Tacoma has an equity program. So they apply the lens of equity across, like, where are we going to put, we have this much money for streetlights, where do we put them? And then it's like, all right, where's the how do we make this equitable? And so with safe consumption sites, there's a rather NIMBY, not in my backyard response to safe consumption sites. Could we apply the distribution of safe consumption sites with an equity program like Tacoma uses, and make it just a state mandate? Like, this is where the need is, this is where it goes. It might be a little too hard to be elected.
Well, I would rather talk about the things that I mean, if I'm talking about like, oh, if I got to do these things, that would be great. I understand there's many steps between me saying like, I think it's a really good idea and implementing that. I would love to know more. Even as somebody that believes that the government is essential for implementing a lot of basic human rights, I do think you need to always be aware of making something not too centralized, because I think a lot of times communities do have the best answers for what works there. So I think that's a great example of, I would absolutely love to know more. King County has been having a terrible time implementing even one safe consumption site, and being fought tooth and nail across the board. So if it seemed like from people that were experts in the area that having it mandated at the state level was the way to go, then I think that is a really good idea. But maybe it is something that we just need to get that model out there, and then communities will adopt it. So I'm not 100% certain about the best way to move forward is.
That was off the idea. It's not like stimulating, so you don't have to take it forward.
Oh, did you have something, Amber?
I do.
Okay, go ahead.
I had another question. This is in regards to things along the lines of whole Washington, things that would save our state budget right now. I know there's going to be a lot of work in the budget in the upcoming sessions, and of course, we're in the middle of a pandemic. So, and we know whole Washington will save a ton of money. One of the other ideas that has been floated is of a state bank. And I was wondering what your thoughts are on state banking and public banking and municipal options.
Yes, and I'm going to add on to that. Yes, it's going to be January is going to be really, really rough. The state budget is going to be in serious trouble. So, yeah, and I actually only learned about the concept of state banking and also looking at public utilities through this election and stuff. And I think the argument is really strong. And again, democratic socialist, so I think that we should always be looking at what are public options and weighing, is that a good idea? Will that really benefit everybody? Will that help, take away the profit incentive that harms people? And I think the state bank is a little bit of a no-brainer. I actually have not heard anybody come up with a good argument of why that isn't a good idea. I know it's Senator Hasagawa that has kind of put that forward, and I've read information that he's put out there, and I think it sounds like a brilliant idea.
Fantastic. Yes, I think it would. We would not have any austerity cuts, and would probably even have enough money to afford UBI for our state.
Yeah, it's funny too, is that they're talking about an $8 billion deficit coming up, and then whole Washington, just healthcare alone covering everybody, would actually save us $9 billion a year. So, don't know. Yeah. Why are they not doing it now? Okay. I'm going to go into, oh, sorry, Courtney just threw her hand up. So before I go in, I will go ahead, Courtney.
I'm not sure where you're going, so I hope I don't step on your toes. I actually thought of two questions. One is about taxes and one is about housing. Both at the state level have, for the taxes, we have a ban on a progressive state tax. We can do a state income tax that's flat, so therefore it's disproportionately oppressive to the lower income people. And then we have a state law banning rent control. So it's in our Constitution against, the tax reform would involve a constitutional amendment. Housing, at least a rent control ban, is only at the state law level. And then when talking about the housing, would you support lifting the ban on rent control? Would you support a statewide rent control? Would you support a just cause or for cause evictions, and or what other housing ideas do you have as well?
Yeah, and those are and that's actually another kind of policy idea that I've taken a deep dive and learned a lot about. And so there was a 1933 court ruling that ruled that the graduate income tax was, it's a statute, so it actually is not in our Constitution. So it's actually something that might not require a constitutional amendment to overturn, because I do think that implementing a graduated income tax, reducing property and sales tax, implementing a capital gains tax, and closing some of our corporate loopholes is absolutely essential to moving forward with any kind of social, progressive social reform. It's just absolutely essential. We really aren't going to be able to implement a lot of the things that we should be implementing without addressing our tax system. And it's also really unfair, and people that are at the bottom income scale pay about 4 times as much in taxes as people that are on the higher end, which is just ridiculous. So I'm absolutely, I think that a graduated income tax would be one of my first priorities going into the legislature. And I think that there's more momentum on that than there has been ever before. So I really think, and from what I understand from people that know what they're talking about with the legal ramifications and stuff, that it actually is very conceivable that it could get through the Supreme Court without requiring the Constitution to be amended. So that's good news. The Olympia DSA has really done a lot of amazing work. Their housing working group has done some really great policies at the state level and ideas for looking at public housing. So absolutely, tenant rights is a huge part of that. I would be very much in favor of overturning the state ban on rent control. I'm not sure if statewide rent control is as good of an idea as making sure that communities could implement that. So I'm not like decided, absolutely against it, but from everything I've read, I would be totally in favor of overturning the state ban on rent control, ending or requiring just cause evictions so that people could not be evicted, without reason or cause. I also think we really need to change some of our housing laws so people that are felons can rent and be able to access housing with a criminal justice history and not be shut out of that. So there's actually a whole slew of tenant right bills that I think are very good ideas. I also think we absolutely need to be looking at public housing. it's kind of ridiculous that all of our solutions, even for the most liberal, even for liberal democratic communities, stop at private public partnerships. Housing is a human right, and we need to make sure that everybody in our communities have housing, and whether they can, whether they make 20,000 a year or they, have no income, that we need to make sure that people have opportunities to be in housing that is safe and affordable for them. Let's see, I was just gonna so yeah, I think that's essential, and I think that we can pour money and spin around all we want on the on looking at homelessness as an isolated crisis, and it's not. We need affordable housing for people, and just because we don't see them living on the street does not mean that it's solved for them too. So I really would be hugely in favor of really looking at us as a state, and it's a longer term solution, but funding through our housing authorities, funding public housing that is permanently non-market. Encouraging and allowing communities and apartment buildings or mobile home parks to cooperatize through community land trust. So we need to have an option for people going forward throughout the state, for affordable housing. So I think those two things are absolutely essential, and I think those are very much tied into coming at it as democratic socialist and viewing things and saying, housing and healthcare and education are not commodities. We have to look at them at a deeper level.
Ah, beautiful. Thank you for that. It was going to go down that way, so I'm glad that you did ask that, Courtney. It is getting close to an hour now, so I do want to make sure, unless there's anything real pressing from you guys, I do want to make sure to give you time, Mary Ellen, to make sure you talk about things that maybe we didn't touch on that you want to make sure the voters do know about you, and then also where they can find you, how they can volunteer, and things like that. Real quick, Courtney, Amber, anything pressing before this part? Nope, good. All right, take it away.
Okay, so yeah, so you can find me, and it is as of today 4 days till the primary. So and for my race, the primary is kind of going to be the big deciding race. So I have, if anybody is in the Thurston County area or wants to come down, we're doing a sign waving and lit drop both tonight and on Monday at evening. We are still giving out literature so people can go around their community, and no doorbelling, but we can leave literature on people's doorsteps. If I make it through the primary and I am headed into the general, I would love to hear from more volunteers. That would be great. We have a lot of amazing volunteers who've given a lot of time, and so we would love to add to their number. We did a lot of phone banking, so that's kind of wrapped up, but that would also be something we would use volunteers for. So you can email me directly at biggerstaffld22@gmail.com, or you can check out my website at maryellenbiggerstaff.com. And through that, I am on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, so people can find me through any of those venues. Yeah, and I think that we touched on a lot of the issues that are really important to me. Healthcare and housing, kind of right out of the bat, were the two ones that I wanted to talk about the most. But I also think it's really important to look at education and how do we equitably fund our education system so that it is not incredibly unequal, especially right now as we're facing the huge, these drastic changes that COVID has brought along with us. I also think looking at the environmental justice, environmental equity, and how do we address global warming and climate change, and that we really can't address it properly through a view of capitalism. We have to be bringing in other ways of looking at our economy to be able to move forward. That none of those issues are really isolated issues. They are all very, very interdependent, and that you can't pick and choose and just talk about small areas of equity without bringing those all together. I mean, in the DSA and what the work that I'm doing in Thurston County is absolutely all related to trying to build this working class multiracial movement, and how do we strengthen our democracy through that. And I think by looking at it through that lens and taking time to build that coalition, we will be able to make changes that we would not be able to with how our system works right now.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you. Thank you again for giving your time to us today and to our members to get to know you better. Thank you all for joining us. We'll go ahead and shut this down for now, but we'll see you again later. Thank you.
And have a great day. Bye-bye.